So we're going to have a look through the papers for you this morning. We're joined today by journalist Ramona Ali and the editor of Politics Home, Kevin Schofield. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Ramona, let's start with inside pages of The Observer this morning. Looking at the good things coming out of Paris, the things we can look at with a sense of pride after the absolute horror.
Yes, it was it's devastating to see what happened on Friday night in Paris. So it was some hope to hold on to when I saw this story of people coming together in solidarity. You know, there were lots of French people who were queuing up to donate blood, and also the taxis are turning off their meters. And there was this hashtag that was trending on Twitter, Porte Ouverte, and that was just offering people shelter and a safe space for people to stay in, you know, that night if they were a bit stranded. So, you know, that notion of people coming together, of solidarity and defiance against what happened, was something that really, really hit home with me.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, often from these most horrific acts which show the worst of humanity, you also see the best of humanity springs from that. There's some doctors coming from as far away as Brittany to help those injured and suffering, and yeah, I mean, it's a glimmer of hope, I think, in a pretty grim scenario that that human nature comes to the fore and people want to help each other.
Yeah, there is always a sense of unification, of solidarity after these sort of things. It's a shame, a tragedy, that it often takes this type of incident for us to show it more publicly.
It is, and it's, you know, France has suffered twice within a year of these horrific attacks, and just that sense where people are coming together to ride through the storm, and, like, you know, in the face of tragedy, there are glimmers of hope, and that is really something that we should hold on to.
In the Mail on Sunday, asking how this was allowed to happen.
Yeah, well, the obvious question, I guess, once you get over the initial shock of it happening, is how could this have happened, or could we have done anything to stop it? And the Mail on Sunday here is looking at three specific areas where it's thought that more could have been done to prevent this from happening. I think the most striking one is an armed man, heavily armed man, was stopped by German police earlier this month, just last week, and they found a hidden compartment in his car containing AK-47s, but this information was not passed on to the intelligence services, and in the GPS system in his car, he was heading for Paris. So you'd like to think that, given that we're supposed to be in a sort of heightened state of alert, and that the authorities are supposed to be mindful, to put it mildly, of what is being plotted at the moment, that would have been passed on to the relevant authorities so that more security measures could have been taken. So it's frightening to think that there are clearly people are being uncovered, but the information isn't enough joined up.
We get these stories periodically about how many, within the UK, how many attacks have been stopped. And I mean, I sit back in absolute awe of what the intelligence services do. But do we become a bit more reliant on them? When something like this happens, we think, how could it have slipped through the net? But actually, they stopped so much already. It's almost a surprise more doesn't happen, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the British intelligence services have been doing an incredible job. You know, they've been keeping us safe for so many years since the horrific events of 7/7. And I think the French are now consulting with the British intelligence, apparently, because, yeah, we're doing such a great job here. But it is a real concern that this guy just, you know, slipped through when he was arrested in Germany, or stopped in Germany.
And open borders in America, you know, I don't want to drag other issues into this too much, but, you know, the idea that people are moving across Europe unchecked from whatever part of the world they're heading from, this does raise into question. All these checks and balances just don't exist now.
Well, that's the thing, and already we'd seen, obviously, prior to this happening, borders starting to come up because of the sheer weight of numbers coming from places like Syria into Europe, and the whole question of whether the Schengen arrangement, as it's known, where there's no borders on mainland Europe and people can move between countries without the need for a passport. That is already, just because, as I say, because of the numbers rather than from a national security point of view, borders are starting to re-emerge, and the whole question, the whole principle of freedom of movement is coming under scrutiny now, and I think this is just going to throw it into more sharp focus, because people tend to want to retreat to where they feel safe. And if they think that people are coming from outside who maybe want to do them harm, then I guess it's only natural for folk to want to put up barriers again to try and protect themselves.
Well, I think it's very chaotic, and it's just riding on this human tragedy that people are trying to, bandwagon themselves onto this, and then it can affect entire vulnerable people, like a lot of refugees who are fleeing persecution and war from Syria and Iraq, and so it's really worrying. But it has to be more. We have to be more vigilant about it.
It's interesting that, of course, looking at this tragedy in several ways. You take the macro view, which of course we have to do and politicians have to do in trying to find a solution to this. But also the micro view. In the Sunday Telegraph, looking at Nick Alexander, the British victim that we know about in all of this, a man there doing his job, said to be one of the nicest people you could ever hope to meet. And actually, it is important to focus on the individuals here, isn't it?
Yeah, this British guy, Nick Alexander, is really bringing a face to this human tragedy. It's horrible. He just went out there to attend a concert, as a heavy metal concert, with his girlfriend, and this story where she's holding him in her arms and saying, "You're the love of my life." It really hits you hard. It really touched me, this story. Especially with someone who, I've been to rock concerts. I love rock music, and you could really resonate with this story that you could be in this situation, you could be killed for just liking rock music. This is an attack on people's lifestyles. So it's a huge concern, and it's just so upsetting to see this. And this young man has really brought that human tragedy home in a real way.
It's the absolute innocence of it. And actually, we had a clip earlier on of some people who were in Trafalgar Square last night, and a young man who sounded as though he was French from his accent, but saying even with the Charlie Hebdo situation, there was a polemic to it. There was a focus of the hatred, whether you agree with that or not, and of course, rightly, most people don't. But here, it is just the fact that it was complete innocence. Who were targeted. Yeah,
these are young people enjoying their lives, and I know we're focusing on a British citizen right now, but there are a lot of French people who have lost their lives, and this story, it is picked up because obviously it resonates with us that we see a British person who's been murdered or harmed in some way, but of course human loss everywhere is to be.
But as you say, we think that it could have been any one of us in any public venue anywhere in the world, really.
It could have been me, it could have been my family, it could have been my friends, it could be any one of us. And that is what is the most scary, is so frightening to think that we're not even safe in our own countries.
Well, they're obviously wanting to make you think twice about just doing normal things, enjoying life, going to a restaurant,
just
going
having
to a bar,
a cup of coffee,
going to a concert, I mean, it's cowardly, isn't it? But that's these are the people who are least expecting anything bad to happen to them on that scale.
So it begs the question: what do we do about this? Obviously, upping national security. We know that is happening in the UK. It's certainly happening in London. It's an understandable reaction. The Sunday Mirror asking: is it time to strike Syria?
Well, this was already a fierce political debate. Obviously, and this again sort of just throws it into sharper focus, I guess. And we've already had in the Sunday Mirror here, it's Labour MPs primarily who are coming out and saying we should think again, we should look again at going into Syria, because obviously I think it's a kind of an obvious reaction that you feel that you need to do something to sort of strike back at so-called Islamic State. And the current political situation is that the government would like to join the US-led bombing against IS targets in Syria. Labour Party's official policy at the moment is, well, let's wait and see, come to us with a plan and then we'll look at it.
Well, that was certainly Jeremy Corbyn's line when he was asked specifically about this yesterday. But I mean, do you think that's something that he might be forced to change his mind on, or is entrenched in that view that, you know, we don't strike?
He'll come under a lot of pressure from the more moderate wing of his party to join in this. But I mean, what you've got to remember about Jeremy Corbyn, he's a politician who probably hasn't changed his mind on very much in 30, 40 years, you know, so the chances that he's going to wake up and think, yeah, I think we should go in and bomb these people, I mean, I just can't see it happening, you know, so there's a potential for...
It's difficult to know what... It's an understandable reaction to everything that's been going on, not just Paris, but everything that's been going on over the last couple of years. Is it actually going to achieve anything other than stoking the fire?
Well, there are lots of concerns here. Like, you know, the president of France, Hollande, said that he would, you know, mercilessly, avenge the deaths of Parisians. So, I feel like there's just this cycle of violence that seems to be being perpetuated. But equally, we have to stop these extremist acts of violence. So something needs to be done.
Well, look, we need to leave it there for now. Kevin, Ramona, thank you both very much, and we'll see you a little bit later on. There is another important story today, which is the weather situation. That's some really severe flooding in parts of the country, particularly in Cumbria. Let's get all the details this morning from Isabel. Well, let's have a look through one of the papers here in the UK this morning with journalist Ramona Ali and the editor of Politics Home, Kevin Schofield. And it's the Independent on Sunday that you've picked. It's looking at Islamic State and saying it's devised a new type of warfare.
Yes, they're combining urban terrorism and guerrilla tactics and like the normal kind of fighting, and it's just becoming more sophisticated. It's getting better planned, and we can see that thousands and thousands of civilians have been killed in Iraq, and it happened again last week. We saw that in Iraq and in Beirut, and again in Paris on Friday. So yeah, they're becoming more sophisticated.
How difficult is it, though, to talk about Islamic State as a group? Isn't it becoming more like Al-Qaeda in the sense that it's effectively franchises now?
Yeah, you've got different cells in different parts of the world, and it makes it virtually impossible, I think, to keep track of all of them. And I think what's interesting is that, you know, there's a debate going on now about whether we should respond to this by joining in the US-led bombing in Syria. But that's almost a sort of conventional military response to what is obviously an unconventional strategy being pursued by the Islamic State, you know. So I mean, it's one thing bombing their infrastructure, and you can see why that would do damage to them, and they're already in retreat in parts of Syria, it looks like, but that in itself wouldn't stop a lone wolf, you know, if you might put it that way, causing carnage on the streets of...
And the tactics are just so shocking as well, and they want to go further in their shocking tactics. Like it says in this article that, you know, they do the decapitation, and they've actually moved on from that because they think that's losing its effect, and they're burning people in cages. Like this Jordanian pilot was burned in a cage to death. So it's horrific and frightening how they're basically stopping at nothing. They just keep going further and further into this evil.
The barbarity of it is very difficult to comprehend.
It
I have
is.
to say. And how can it be justified within the terms of what they say their religion is?
It can never be justified. And how can anyone justify this? It's disgusting, it's brutal, it's an attack on everyone, everywhere. I think Obama said that it's an attack on humanity as a whole. So, and even David Cameron was saying, you know, our pain, you know, your pain is our pain. So there is this sense of it's attacking all of us, all of our values, and it's absolutely sickening and should be condemned.
Ramona, Kevin, we need to leave it there for this hour. See you a little bit later on. Thank you. Let's get a check on the weather for you this morning with Isabel. Some very severe weather on the way for some parts of the UK.